Put your seatbelts on and get ready for the ride. We're the freaking New York Jets, so we're built for this shit.
Hello, welcome to another episode of In the Trenches with Gang Green. I'm your host, Bubbs. Today is Tuesday, March 4th. Hopefully everybody's having a good day so far today. This is episode 502 of the In the Trenches with Gang Green podcast. I thank you, as always, for joining me. For those tuning in on YouTube, make sure to please like and subscribe. Of course, appreciate all of those tuning in on all the different audio podcast platforms. Today, we've got a lot of New York Jets news to discuss as Davante Adams has officially been released. We will break that down. We also expect Allen Lazard to be moved within the coming days before free agency and the start of the new league year. And I also want to take a look at two receivers that the New York Jets could potentially add. Both of them have been linked to the Jets in free agency to help solve the receiver room outside of Garrett Wilson. We'll break that all down in today's podcast. As always, though, before we begin, we got to tell you about our podcast partners, starting with our friends over at BetUS, America's favorite online sportsbook. It is March. March Madness is here. The college basketball season is ramping up to its final stretch, the most exciting time of the season. It's the tournament. If you want to get in on any of the March Madness betting action or any sports betting action, check out BetUS and use my link in the description of this video to get a 125% sign-up bonus on your first three deposits up to $2,000. If you're looking to get any of the hottest tickets to March Madness or any of the best sporting events or the best in entertainment, make sure to check out SeatGeek. And at checkout, use code BUBSONSPORTS for $20 off your purchase. Look for the green dots. Those are the good deals. $20 off. Code BUBSONSPORTS. First-time user of SeatGeek. And get yourself out to some awesome events. And, of course, our friends over at Huga House. If you want any of their new selection of hats and sweatshirts or originals, check them out and use code BUBS for 15% off your first hat. And then you'll get 30% off your second hat when you use code BUBS on your first purchase. So check them out and get yourself some awesome Huga House swag. So here we go, episode 502. Thank you, as always, for tuning in. A little bit of a later episode today. Apologize for that. Had some stuff going on earlier this afternoon, but still wanted to get some out, especially since we got breaking news earlier today. Breaking news, but not really surprising news, as Davante Adams has been released from the New York Jets. I think any Jet fan knows that this was coming. You got the report a couple days ago that the New York Jets were shopping Davante Adams. You also heard Darren Muji at the Combine last week say how they have, the plan for Davante Adams figured out. He's on the team for now, and they'll make a decision, and they'll officially, move forward with their plan in the coming weeks. And, a week later, we get the decision today. This isn't a surprise. The reporting, Muji, and really the biggest fact of them all, that Aaron Rodgers isn't returning. We all knew Davante Adams would not come back to the New York Jets. So another receiver now out. The Davante Adams, Aaron Rodgers slate is now officially cleaned, as Rodgers will, of course, hit the open market with the Jets moving on once the new league year begins. So the Jets now, with this Davante Adams move, which is really the most important aspect of all this, they'll now save $29.9 million in cap space since he had no guaranteed money on his contract. So a very big chunk of cap space is now being opened up here for the New York Jets. They went into today, prior to Davante Adams' move, with around $23 million in cap space prior to this cut. That was around 20th in the NFL. However, post Davante Adams cut now, $29.9 million being freed up, the Jets now have around roughly $52 million in cap space, which currently jumps from 20th in the NFL now all the way up to 10th in the NFL. So they are now top 10 in cap space, and that could continue to go up as well if Allen Lazard gets moved, which we heard today that the New York Jets gave Lazard permission to seek a trade. I would expect if no trade's done, most likely you just move on from him. So if that's the case as well, only a matter of time until Lazard is shown the door. Basically already has been showed the door. We just need the official announcement that they've released him. When that happens, assuming that does, Lazard cut is going to be $6.3 million freed up, plus the $9.5 million that still has to officially come off the books with the Aaron Rodgers move. The Jets here in a couple days from now, by free agency, by the new league year, can go from 20th to 10th to 6th in cap space, where they'll have up to $69.3 million. Of course, the cap increasing this year up to $279.5 million. So opening up a lot of cap space with this move and other moves as well, right? Most likely you move on from CJ Mosley. Michael Clemens is an obvious cut candidate. Greg Zuerlein is an obvious cut candidate. You look at those, Jets can honestly get all the way up to potentially 4th. We talked about this a couple episodes ago. Get all the way up to 4th in the NFL in cap space if they follow through with some other cuts that can take some money off the board, where you're maybe looking at upwards to 78, 79 million in cap space, which would be around 4th in the NFL. So you can understand where this move's coming from. Both sides. Davante wasn't going to stay here. Jets weren't going to hold on to him without Rodgers returning. You look at his numbers last year, 11 games, 67 receptions, 114 targets, 854 yards, 12.7 yards per reception, and 7 touchdowns. Similar to the way Rodgers viewed the whole Davante Rodgers era, it's a blip on the radar. It's a failed experiment. It's a failed era that ultimately led to 5 wins. The trade was happened when the team was 2-4, coming off that Monday night loss against Buffalo. The Jets thought that Davante could fix all their problems. That was clearly not the case because Davante couldn't play defense. He couldn't play, he couldn't kick. He couldn't coach. There was a lot of other issues that Davante Adams couldn't solve. And we obviously saw that finishing 5-12. But now you look at this Jets receiving room. And what I really want to get into now as well, right? Davante out the door, Lazard soon as well. Not that Lazard's any good. But you look at this Jets receiving core, and credit to Dylan, who runs the NY Jets Fans Only account. He did a really nice breakdown. Throw this graphic up here for the YouTube audience of the Jets receiving room right now. You look at the guys that are under contract. It's Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, Xavier Gibson, Aesop Winston, Ontario Wilson, and Brandon Smith. Your free agents, other ones, Irv Charles, Malik Taylor. That's your receiving room right now. You have, at best, your wide receiver running Garrett Wilson, who they should extend, and probably a 4th wide receiver in Malachi Corley, at best, if that. I mean, the guy barely played. Do we even know he's a 4th wide receiver? Do we even know he's going to make the team? It's a different regime. He barely played last year. I'd assume he does. So probably 4th wide receiver. And then the guy in Xavier Gibson, who is mainly just a special teams guy and regressed last year on special teams. So basically, it's Garrett Wilson and a bunch of nobodies. At best, probably a wide receiver core 4 in Malachi Corley. So you're looking at that receiving room. It needs a lot of help. You need to pick up a 2nd receiver, a 3rd receiver, and probably one more. You're really looking at, you're going to need to find 3 quality NFL-level receivers through free agency and the NFL draft. And 2 names were linked to the New York Jets at the receiver position that the team could look through in free agency. Now, we've already talked about one of the names, so I won't spend a ton of time on him because we have already discussed him. The other name I want to break down a little bit more just because we haven't talked about him yet. The first one is Tim Patrick. Rich Cimini a couple weeks ago linked Tim Patrick to the Jets in an article that he did. And then the other day, Zach Rosenblatt of The Athletic had a really good article breaking down a ton of stuff, a ton of takeaways from the combine, kind of what he's hearing with the quarterback position, which we'll have some episodes out on, and really just a good offseason kind of update going into free agency and, of course, the draft here in a little over a month and a half from now. But Tim Patrick was one of the names both Cimini and Zach Rosenblatt brought up. And then another name was Joshua Palmer, who Cimini, or rather Rosenblatt, brought up in his most recent article. We talked a little bit about Tim Patrick a couple weeks ago on an episode when I talked about Tim Patrick and Carlton Davis, two Detroit Lions with connections to Glenn and Tanner Engstrand, how they could fit here. You know, Patrick's a guy that tore his ACL in 2022 before the season and tore his Achilles before the season in 2023. So missed 2 years. Does also have the connection with Darren Muji from their Denver days, right? He spent 6 seasons in Denver. Only 4 of those he actually played. And then one most recently in Detroit. The obvious thing that concerns you about Tim Patrick is 31 years old, been in the NFL for 7 years, but only essentially, 5 of them he has played, and he's only getting older, and the injuries are a concern, and you wonder if he can get back to the 700-plus yard production as a number 2 or number 3 option that he was at prior to the 2 devastating injuries in 22-23. The biggest thing you look for with Tim Patrick is he knows the scheme. He played last year under Tanner Engstrand in that Detroit Lions offense, where he put together a full 16 out of 17 games, 33 receptions, 394 yards, 3 touchdowns, nothing crazy, but understands the system and fits the system pretty well. Very good from a run blocking perspective for a wide receiver. Finished top 5 among wide receivers last year in run block grade. His overall and receiving grade, 66.9 overall grade, 66 receiving grade, were both around average. That's what you're looking at. You're looking at a solid number 3 with possible upside for number 2 if he can get back to where he was prior to the torn Achilles and torn ACL that he suffered in 2022 training camp and 2023 training camp. He's not a huge name, but he's a scheme fit and he's affordable. That's kind of the billing that you're probably going to look for the Jets to target with a lot of these positions. You're going to see a lot of Glenn guys. You're going to see some Engstrand guys. You're probably going to see some Steve Wilkes guys that are also relatively cheap. No, I don't think the Jets are going to go basement bargain shopping, but they're also not going to spend like drunken sailors. I think they're going to look for a lot of affordable options that fit their vision and fit their scheme, and Tim Patrick's one of those guys. It makes a lot of sense from that perspective. So you understand why you see a lot of those links. I will say one thing about Tim Patrick. Something that this Jets team, really Alan Lazard, but in general, have struggled with is drops. The amount of drops that this team has taken in the last couple years is infuriating. Tim Patrick's a guy that when the football's thrown his way, he catches the football. And that might sound like a simple concept, but it's an important one because the Jets are a team that have struggled with drops. He's only had 10 drops in his career. He had 0 last season. To put that into perspective, Alan Lazard had 13 drops in his 2 seasons with the New York Jets. So you are getting a guy in Tim Patrick that can catch the football. Is he going to put up eye-popping numbers? No. But can you get Tim Patrick and maybe you take, let's say, hypothetically, a Tet McMillan and then go out and take another cheaper free agent? I don't think that's the worst possibility for the Jets. I don't think it is. So that's the first name. Now, the other name that I want to spend a little bit more time on as well is Joshua Palmer, because we haven't talked about him yet. Zach Rosenblatt, of course, linked him to the Jets in his most recent article. Former third-round pick, 77th overall by the Chargers out of Tennessee in 2021. Has spent all 4 years of his NFL career so far with the Chargers. Another affordable option, something that Palmer does have over Tim Patrick. Tim Patrick, a 2018, when he made his debut, actually went undrafted. Joshua Palmer's younger. Patrick's 31. He'll be 32 in November of the season. So entering his age 31-32 season, Joshua Palmer, on the other hand, is much younger. He'll be 26 in September. So entering his really age 26 season, he's on the younger side, coming off his rookie deal, first-time free agent. I think there's probably a little bit more upside with Joshua Palmer. You look at his career so far, the roles that he has been in. His first 3 years, he was primarily a number 3 behind Keenan Allen and Mike Williams. And in Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, of course, leave after last season. Mike Williams comes to the Jets. We know how that pans out. Keenan Allen goes to Chicago. And last year, it was kind of wide receiver by committee. Palmer, though, kind of fell into the third role, which I guess isn't a great view because there were other receivers that were ahead of him were Ladd McConkey was a rookie, had a very good year, over 1,000 yards, and then Quentin Johnson. Joshua Palmer finished third on the team in receiving yards, and he was kind of utilized, especially when you look at the receptions, as that third receiver. That's kind of been his primary role, is the number 3. Even last year, sort of the number 3. So you're probably looking at Palmer as number 3. Then you'd have to find your number 2, whether that's in the draft or another free agent option. And then hope and have the upside that Palmer can be a number 2, because Palmer has had a couple good seasons. His best season came in 2022 rather, where he had 72 receptions, 769 yards. That his yards actually ranked second on the team that year, in both 2022 and 2023. His 769 yards and his 581 yards in 22-23 both ranked second on the team. Even though he was primarily utilized as that third guy, yards-wise was second. Part of that, too, was injuries, of course, to Keenan Allen, Mike Williams. Mike Williams went down very early in 2023, so that was also part of it. And then rookie season was around 4th. Last year was 3rd in yards. But his best season was in 2022, where you saw that 700-plus yard potential, maybe a guy that can hit 800. That's a guy that can be a number 3, upside number 2, alongside Garrett Wilson. You look at his career numbers, 59 games played, 182 receptions, 2,287 yards, 12.6 yards per reception, and 10 touchdowns. That is one part of his game that's kind of underwhelming. He doesn't score much. He doesn't get in the end zone much. Again, he is coming from a team where he was playing that, alongside Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. He is coming from an offense that for a little bit there, they also had Austin Eckler, who had a couple really, really good seasons. So he was coming from an offense that had, I guess in a way, a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So they did, Herbert had to spread the ball around. But still, his career high in touchdowns was 4. And he's actually gone down each year. 4 in 2021, 3 in 2022, 1 in 2020, or 2 in 2023, and then 1 last year. You like to see him, if he does get here, score a little bit more. The Jets need guys that can score and get in the end zone. This team has sucked in the red zone. They need to find guys that can be able to finish drives and especially be good, in between the 20s is great. But once you get inside the 20s, find a way to finish drives. We'll see if Palmer can do that. 6'1", 210, not crazy big. Last year, 39 receptions, 584 yards, a touchdown. You look at some of the PFF numbers for Palmer. He had a 67.0 overall grade, about average. 68.3 receiving grade, about average. However, I will throw 2 stats out there, and I know these are more advanced numbers, so they don't mean everything, but they are still something to keep an eye on. His average depth to target last year was 15.1, which was 7th in the NFL. And his average, or his yards per reception of 15 yards, was 14th in the NFL. So this was a guy in terms of yards per reception, and most importantly, average depth to target, can stretch the field a little bit. And that is something that this Jets offense needs to do more of in 2025. And can we stop playing a 10-yard box offense where it's a bunch of slants, it's a bunch of quick speed outs, it's a bunch of nothing? Can we stretch the field a little bit? Can the average depth of target for some of these guys be a little higher? 15, 16 yards, where you're, spreading the ball downfield, stretching the field a little bit more vertical. Can we do some of that more in 2025? If so, Palmer kind of fits that billing when you look at his average depth of target, which was 7th in the NFL among all receivers. So it's something intriguing. But look, these two guys don't fly off the charts. You go with a Tim Patrick, you go with a Josh Palmer, two guys that are around, their most recent AAV was for Palmer, he was making $1.2 million about, and then for Tim Patrick, it was about $1.1 million. So again, two very affordable guys. And then you'd have to figure something out too through the draft with this receiving core, because you need a lot of help there. Do you take a Tet McMillan if he falls to 7? Luther Burden, Emeka Ibuka, probably the three guys that fall on day one. Maybe Matthew Golden does, but not in the Jets range. He'll be late day one, early day two. If the Jets trade back, I think Luther Burden and Emeka Ibuka could still be two good possible options. And then if you look day 2, day 3, Jaden Higgins is a guy that's rose up the ranks. He had a very good combine. I would say Higgins is a guy that you're probably going to have to look at probably with your 42nd pick, assuming no trades are happening. Jalen Noel out of Iowa State, another name that I like. We've talked a little bit about. Tez Johnson didn't have a great combine, but I think he's an interesting prospect. Trey Harris from Ole Miss I like as a potential third-round addition. Isaiah Bond, Pat Bryant. I love Nick Nash. Nick Nash is one of my draft crushes. I think Nick Nash is an excellent receiver. If the Jets want to go the wait and take a guy day 3, Nick Nash might fall to day 3. I think you're getting a very intriguing prospect if you take Nick Nash. But I do think, again, you don't want to go into the season with two, Josh Palmer and Nick Nash can't be your two guys. You need a little bit more proven than that. You're going to need to go maybe cheaper free agent, a little bit more expensive free agent, and then draft pick or third round pick, day 2, day 3 receiver, and then go a little bit more heavier or a little bit more, I guess, expensive wise, higher value free agents, and then later picks draft wise? Or do you go the lower value free agents, meaning, cheaper guys, and then you go higher value from a draft perspective where you take a Tet McMillan or somebody else one? We'll see how they do that, because they also have a lot of other holes to fill. Safety, tight end, right tackle, defensive line, cornerback 2, potentially linebacker. And no, I'm not forgetting about the most important one, quarterback, but we all know that's a need. So, see how they approach it. Only a couple days away. That's the great part. It's been about a month talking about this. Soon we'll get these answers, at least from free agents' perspective. Draft, we got to wait a little bit longer, but you'll get a good idea of where they're going to go in the draft after, what they do in free agency. So that'll do it. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Appreciate you tuning in. Again, apologize for the late upload, but figured Davante Adams getting released. Talk a little Lazard as well, as that's happening very soon. Probably by the end of this week, we'll get the official answer there. Figured, you know what? We'll piece some of the Lazard Adams stuff, piece it into some free agent targets that the Jets could look at a position of need, and we'll call it a day. That's exactly what we did. So I thank you so much for tuning in. We'll have a lot more content the rest of the week as we get ready for free agency here, starting up next week. Stay tuned. Until next time, JETS, 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 Jets.